Well, who's a big fat liar? That's me. Welcome into Rates and Barrels. We are back. I am back. I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be here. Blah, 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 blah. And I just didn't pay attention to the schedule. The very last show, which is at the end of the season. So I'm not going to complain because I get to talk to all of you wonderful people.
Surprise Rates and Barrels.
Hey, and I get to see that face right there. I get to see Eno, who, as I told people online and many other did, love this guy. Love this guy. The article came out about you, and we had the good old love fest, which, you know what, man? I'm all here for, because there's so much negativity that floats out there. I even did one of those kind of tweets where I was just like, hey, man, I just want to thank everybody for hanging out with me. I'm in a lot of places. There's no way everybody can like me, and I try not to put all the same takes. And I've really tried to outsource my stuff in different capacity. And one thing that's been so unique is this show with you specifically, has been, I think, one of my best ventures into being something different than sometimes what I am. And you've made me better. But my whole point was like, I was thanking people for following along and not completely hating me. And there was a big love fest there for me. And I was like, oh, that's so nice. You put out the article, same thing. And it's deserved. And you had to really let your guard down a little bit to let someone really get into like the shoes that you play on the opposite end of.
He was contacting people from my high school. So, yeah, that was nerve-wracking.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, he was calling some people. But, I really appreciate the job that Brian Roth did over at Good Beer Hunting. It's very nice of him. And he treated me well in the piece. And you should check him out. If you like stats, you probably do if you're listening to this. And beer, he is the preeminent sort of data journalist when it comes to beer. It's been... It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure working with him. I worked with him in different spots, and it was very nice of him to write that piece. So,
what an all-time line you just said! Premium data analyst for beer. That's the world we live in. That's an amazing world we live in.
There was once a time that I wanted to be that. I had the beer data website, Beer Graphs, and unfortunately, one thing that is interesting about beer and other places and data in general is that. And it's really complicated. Is just that who owns the data, who gets the profit off of it, how much right do we have to that data? That data is often born off of individual consumers. How much right do they have to it? There's a lot of complicated things, and those things are complicated even in baseball. If you think about it, like biomechanical data, I really would love to have more of it. But think about the process of creating biomechanical data is a player just being. It's just like moving through space. And here I am being like, I want that data. Give it to me. It's like, I deserve that data. Well, it's complicated. It's about a person's muscles and how his body works. And like, am I really entitled to that? And how much control do they have over that? So anyway,
bigger worldly questions, very AI type of thing.
That was a little bit of digression, but yeah.
Now we're going to talk about AI here on the that's where we were going with that. I agree, but also those are the questions and why you are who you are and what makes you great about what you do.
And that's why Beer Graphs died in the end, was that the data we were getting from Untapped. Untapped was bought by a data concern, and they wanted the data, and so they turned down the API, and we no longer had that hose of data. And without that, then what are you cutting up? What were our leader awards going to be? So that was the difficulty there.
Well, we will try to make it not difficult for this episode moving forward. We actually have some unique things to do in this episode, even though it's at the end of the season. We're going to be going through not just like the typical, because I kind of did this earlier on in like last week or early in the week of going like, hey, who are the fantasy MVPs and who are the guys that played bad? Yes, we're going to do that, but we're going to use it also from an auction calculator standpoint. We're going to be able to base it ADPs to earners. We're also going to be talking about overall big gainers and earners, some stat based ups and downs. Where in the season have we seen overall stats go? I created this kind of super player thing, just very easy math stuff of taking we'll talk about more, but taking the top 30 at every single category, averaging it out, and then finding the players that met that criteria and guys that might have been closer. Hitters are a little bit tougher. The pitchers are pretty fascinating, and you can take that for whatever, because we always have that going into each season. Here are the numbers that you want to accumulate in a roto. Here,
the goals.
Yeah, this is kind of a player-based standpoint of
we'll talk about how those goals should change and how baseball changed this season too. So.
Exactly. That's what we're going to be doing. Also, we almost had no baseball yesterday on Monday. It would have been one of the few days, except the Arizona Fall League did start up. We don't have to go crazy into it. And I know Arizona Fall League is my thing. I'm out here and I went and it was exciting. It's going to be going on all through November 11th, I think it is. You got some big players going, and we had a big player go on opening day of the Arizona Fall League in Jackson Jobe, though I had some differing opinions on his start than what publicly was out there, because, here's a cool new thing that the Arizona Fall League implemented this year. Is they're actually televising, I believe, a game every single day. It's one game, and it's going to be on, I think it's it's MILB or MLB website. You got to forgive me for not knowing, because I'm here. Sorry, I'm here.
Well, MILB.TV and MLB TV are kind of linked, I think, even in terms of subscribership. And
yeah, I think, and it's on it's pretty, once you know what it is, I didn't look at it ahead of time, I apologize, but they're televising. And last night they televised the Salt River game, which I also found out about because people tweeted me because they saw me on the thing. And I discovered I have to not sit back and just straight. I was like, dude, the picture somebody sent me, I was like, please scrub that from the internet. Oh my God, what was I doing? So then the whole time I'm like sucking in, and I'm like, okay, that's how I'm gonna do my video. I was terrified of how I looked, so I'm gonna not eat for the
But your Jobe analysis was fascinating to me because, I am going to update the sheet with end of year numbers, but in my last numbers for low A that had Jobe in them, had he thrown enough to be considered a starter, he only threw 43 pitches per appearance. He would have had the number one stuff plus among starters, and also an average location plus. So, a guy like Thomas Harrington had really good stuff plus, 99 location plus. Ricky Tiedemann shows up on our list. He had better location plus. There's some guys. The number one guy for stuff plus, Saul Garcia, in low A, had an 87 location plus, and seems that's very, very poor.
Yeah,
you'd expect all these numbers to be lower considering it's low A, this lesser talent. But Jobe had average location plus, and the feedback I'm hearing from you is that you don't think you were watching average location plus.
Yeah, so that was my big thing, because there's a big love fest about Jobe last night. Like, hey, it was a great appearance, and he was pretty good.
98.
Yeah, exactly. On top of, by the way, getting the televised games, Salt River Fields, anytime a game is there, you can actually get StatCast data. So we have StatCast data from last night's game. He hit 98.3. I think he was, actually, I can look here. I think he was averaging 96. He was, are they giving me? Yeah, he was averaging 96.2 on the fastball. He had 9 swing and whiffs on 55 pitches. He had a really good whiff rate, 38%. Because when he was getting swings on the slider and changeup, people were not making contact on it.
But command is how you get swings. So
yeah, he had 5 of 8 swings between the slider and changeup were whiffed on. His CSW percentage was lower, but here was my take on it.
But 8 swings on 55 pitches is not.
On the slider and on the changeup. On the slider and the changeup. He had 12 swings on the fastball, but only 3 whiffs. And that was my thing with this, is the command looked off. Though he had 4 strikeouts, the fastball was up and no one swinging at it in the beginning. And it kept
above the zone, like not even close to zone.
Above the zone. That's all he wanted to do.
Like non-competitive ones too?
There were some competitive ones that guys were sitting on, but there were some non-competitive ones. I filmed like every single pitch I have, and I actually want to go back and break it down. I just didn't have time from last night to hear you and I could. To be honest with you, I wanted to do it with you, but we wouldn't have been able to do it today. I wanted to go back through because it looked a little bit flatter than my expectation on it. And let me see what the spin was. I mean, 25, but this is a guy, his slider hit over 3,000. I mean, it's a big old, movement slider, but the command was just off. And in the second inning, he decided to go heavier fastball and it worked. But then when he did it with the second time through the order, started getting hit hard. Brian Ramos hit a double for 103. So the only thing I'm coming back to on this week, I could go on a loop talking about one start for this guy there was a lot of buildup and everything for this, but the location wasn't as great. And I had said in a preview podcast I did on my show Prospect One, I had said, like, this is the guy that could have the biggest rise from the Arizona Fall League because there's a lot of big loopy swingers here. Guys like Aaron Sabato who strike out and hit 210. And, there's just a bunch of these guys. He could pile up the strikeouts. But the only thing is he wanted that fastball up, up, up. That's all he did. He did not move the fastball around the zone enough, at least that I thought. And it equated to an under 50% zone percentage on the fastball. And he just didn't get the swings. But the positive is the fastball still set up the other stuff. He was able to get through, which wasn't a great start. And I will get to compare him against Ricky Tiedemann, who's pitching tonight as we're recording this. And that's going to be kind of the fun.
He
guys
should
like
have better
Jerpy.
command.
Yeah, Jerpy. Actually, also tonight, I don't know if this game will be televised. Jake Eater and Takoa Roby are going up against each other in the same game. We're also going to see Cooper Jerpy. So there's some actually good pitchers to kind of pit up against each other. But you mentioned Tiedemann as a guy with solid command. What was the command number? The
108.
Yeah, 108. That's better than Jobe. It'll be interesting to see how these guys pair out. And that is stuff I will be continuously trying to share.
The fastball velo for Tiedemann. It's been a little bit up and down.
He was in a good mood last night too. I talked to him because I actually went over back to Surprise because I live right next to it and talked to him, and he was pretty jacked up about pitching tonight. And that is where I will be, and I'll have some stuff on Twitter you can see, and hopefully that fastball is popping. We're just not going to get StatCast data, which is going to be, that's kind of lame. I would like it to get everywhere, but in the coming weeks,
viewership might be down tonight. Maybe not as many people passing around Tiedemann stuff, but actually,
maybe.
Fantasy fans, most of their teams are done. And so now they have this extra component of, do I watch real baseball or do I watch players that'll be more relevant for my fantasy team next year?
I have that too. The Diamondbacks are in the playoffs tonight, and I have to go to Surprise and watch Tiedemann. So I'm going to be like phone and all that. But it'll be fun.
My son's Little League game watching.
Well, so you'll be doing baseball then too, as well. So you got a little bit.
Baseballs.
Yeah. Well, in a couple of weeks, DVR and I will all be in person out here in the First Pitch Conference, which would be pretty great. Hopefully do a podcast. We'll all get to hang out together, talk about these players, do more breakdowns, and I will just be presenting the lead up to when you guys are all here, and we'll see what that culminates to. So again, Arizona Fall League stuff, whenever I'm here, we'll talk about it. You can also follow me on Twitter if you would like to follow some of those things. I'm also doing like a live notebook that I have out there with just everything I see. I'm writing every single start and different players, and I picked up a lot of stuff last night. So that's your little AFL look. Let's talk about the season as a whole. You and I were talking about the fantasy MVP, the Cy Young, and then we've also going to do I don't know why it made me laugh so much, the Cy Yuck and the fantasy suck.
Copyright Jason Stark.
Yeah, Jason Stark. There
LVP.
you go. So the LVP. So let's talk about the fantasy MVP, because you and I, the big thing, we kept going back and forth about these for different reasons, because I think what you have to do is, yes, Ronald Acuna is the MVP for what he did, but you've got to compare value in where you drafted these players to like the overall return dollars and stuff like that. And I think that changes up the names. We came across a couple different players, and I'm going to throw up the top two that you and I were debating. And then I don't know if we came to an agreement. I came to a decision based on the auction calculator that I felt, but you and I were going back and forth about Matt Olson and Corbin Carroll. Both had ADPs within about 10 spots of each other, but they were in the 40s and 50s. Matt Olson ended up having the second highest auction calculator dollar return at 44. He actually had a higher dollar return than his ADP, and he was a little bit lower. And Corbin Carroll had a 10 spot lower ADP and returned $37, because I kind of thought Corbin Carroll might be that guy without being obnoxious. Both of those guys, top 5 returns with ADPs in the 40s and 50s. But then the big outlier, and this is the guy I'm going to go with, is Cody Bellinger, who ended up having the 11th best overall dollar amount and he had a 186 ADP according to Fangraphs. And I think if you and I are going to be touting a fantasy MVP with value into consideration, I kind of think Bellinger's that guy if we don't tag Olsen or Corbin Carroll.
Yeah, it's a philosophical question almost, because do you want your MVP to be in the top 5? With fantasy, there's going to be some element of what did you pay for it, right? So is it cooler to get a top 5 player that you didn't pay a first round price for? Is it cooler to get a top 15 talent that you didn't even pay a top 10 round price for? Or is it cooler to get a top 30 guy that you got with your last pick in Josh Lowe? I mean, his ADP was 400, according to the auction calculator.
Yeah.
So and
really
he
tapered
still,
off on the back end, though.
he did, but he returned $24. Cody Bellinger returned 31. This is a 15 team 5OF MICI 2 utility setup. And we got Cody Bellinger returning 31. I mean, that's $7 less and 214 picks later. So there is always this question of a sliding scale, but I'm comfortable giving it to Cody Bellinger because just outside the top 10 for that low of a price, I think that captures the essence of what we're going for most. Just one thing that occurs to me is, and I'm thinking about always at the end of the season looking at what's happened and what I did in my leagues and thinking about if I need to adjust. And I don't think that I'm going to come off of the idea that I want to bat in the first round. There's going to be some adjustment to my pitching process that we'll get to, but you got Ronald Acuna, number 1, and he was a first rounder. Mookie Betts, number 4, he was a first rounder. Freddie Freeman. I'm just going to name out all the first rounders and where they went. Ronald Acuna 1, Freddie Freeman 3, Mookie Betts 4, Shohei Ohtani 6, Bobby Witt 7, Julio Rodriguez 8, Kyle Tucker 9, and then Juan Soto 14, Jose Ramirez 19, and Trey Turner 20. So you didn't really do poorly. There is one that'll show up in our LVP discussion. But it really looks like among the first round bats, the worst you did is a top 20 guy, other than the LVP we'll get to.
And I feel like that did lock
first
in.
round
I
bat.
agree
You're
with you.
buying floor as much as anything. You're buying into this, high floor. And it really did work out. First round bats did work out this year.
Yeah, and there's a lot of value in pitching. Actually, something when we talk just a tiny bit of I'm just calling it like the super players on all the averages, there was actually a lot more pitchers that got closer to the super player than it was the hitters. So, those gaps start to close a little bit. And, the term that gets thrown around a lot, like the glob of pitching, the guys that are very similar, that thing kind of gets thrown out. And I see where it's going, and we can talk about that. All right, so we're going to semi-agree that Cody Bellinger gets our lock there. Fantasy Cy. So the Fantasy Cy Young guy, the same metric here is being put on all these players where there are guys with, huge dollar returns. Garrett Cole was so much better than the next guy, but cost a top 15. There's actually, I think there's some bigger debate here because inside the top $5, there are 3 players that are outside the top 100 and 2 that are outside the top 200. I settled on Blake Snell because of how ridiculously elite he was this year.
You want elite. I get it.
Like elite. And he was outside the top 100. But boy, is there an argument to be made for Zach Eflin, who came in at a $21.9 return, which is only like about $3 less than Snell, and he was a 271 ADP.
Man, the Stuff Plus champion Kyle Bradish came in 5th with $21.50 and according to this, 317 ADP. So I
mean, who do you give it to then?
Again, we have this decision about do you want a top 3 pitcher that you paid just outside the 7th or 8th round on, or do you want someone who you took all the way down to the bottom? I am actually a little bit different on pitching than hitting. With pitching, I just like to get a top 5 pitcher, 300 plus. That's just obviously my guy. I'm definitely going with him as the Cy Young, fantasy Cy Young, because there's so many other pitchers you could have taken. You could have taken Snell and Bradish. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so much value, so great to have on your team, to have a guy that you took near the end just be there all season for you, you know,
Yeah.
and just give you this much value. Like, I have a slightly different take, and then I also have a slightly different take on taking high pitchers, which again I'm going to I have a little bit of a softening of the stance, but high pitchers were hit and miss. You've got Ohtani, Cole, Burns, and Strider. So with those four, the first four taken, you did well. The worst was Ohtani, $16, and you had him as a hitter too. But it's not unquestionable that it was good. And if you happen to not get the top four, it really started to fall apart. I mean, Sandy Alcantara was the 5th guy taken. He had a negative value. Aaron Nola was the 6th guy taken. He was only worth $6 this year. Brandon Woodruff was worth twice that, but still, you took him as the 7th top pitcher, and you got 67 innings out of that. And then you can go to Dylan Cease at the 11th taken pitcher, and he was worth -$9. Christian Javier was 12th. He was worth minus. Shane Bieber was 13th. He wasn't even worth $1. Julio Urias was 15th. He was worth $3.80. Carlos Rodon was 18th. He was worth -$13. And I haven't even mentioned the Cy Yuck yet. So
yeah, I don't. Yeah, save that. That's an
so
amazing number.
So, really, if you just look at the top 20, it's 50-50. Yes, the top 4 worked out. If you want to make a hard and fast rule that like the top 4 are just going to be separate every year, more power to you. But Burns was up and down, and it could have gone sideways. Sandy Alcantara, I think, was a consensus top 5 guy. So you're really going to draw the line there where you're just like, oh no, he was 5, but he wasn't 4. You know what I mean? It's like, I think that top pitchers are way more of a even production risk versus top hitters.
6 of the top 10 SP earners went overall 90 or later. So, I mean,
yeah, that's another way of saying it.
Yeah,
like,
it's
there's
crazy.
so much value later on. We didn't even mention Justin Steele in the Cy Young conversation. Tarek Skubal, ended up 21st. Michael Waka, dude, like, he was free.
He was free. He was 100%.
Yeah.
There's a lot of free pitchers. We're going to talk about a few more of those guys here in a little bit. Let's talk about the fantasy LVP. And this was, you and I were kind of like, we were going through this, and I was like, I think I found it, because we actually sorted by ADP. There's guys that are going to have negative values and stuff, but there is a massive standout when you sort by ADP this past year. You're looking at, just for argument's sake here, Trey Turner, really bad start, kind of came back, still had a $26 return. He was taking 2 overall. That's not a good value compared to like 4.2 ADP Julio, who returned 35. We're going double digits. Boom, boom, boom. Then we get to the teens, and Mike Trout's $4 return this year is sandwiched between, I'm going to look here. I don't think there's anybody else less than 18 in the top 20. There isn't anyone in the top 20 ADP. No one had less than 18. And we're talking $18 return of Machado, Bichette, and Guerrero. And then you go down to $4 on Trout. That's our fantasy LVP.
Yeah, there's no way around it. I mean, you can look down a little bit further. JT Realmuto was the 22nd player taken in NFB's drafts, and it was only worth $12.50. He kind of stands out there. But when it comes to catchers, that's that's like a decent return. Like Dalton Varsho was taken 29th, and he only returned $8. So it's not like just like tons of catchers that were amazing and returned all their value. So just a down year a little bit there. And then I want to mention Jazz Chisholm because he went 29th and it was only worth $9. Along with Varsho, those could be on the LVP ballot, perhaps. But we also got a mailbag question real quick here about Jazz Chisholm. We had a listener that was debating Jazz Chisholm and Christian Encarnacion Strand versus Jackson Chourio and Dylan Cruz. And I just wanted to mention this because it's the kind of decision making that we are going to have to make this off season where, I know that and I respect this sort of analysis that you had, Chris, that don't worry so much about the very top prospects about how long it's going to take them to get there, because there's a piece by I think it was JJ Cooper on or Matt Eddy on Baseball America just about how quick people are going through the minor leagues now. And it's not something we're making up. It's definitely in the numbers. So I kind of think that with these particular people, I just feel like Chisholm and Christian Encarnacion Strand are interesting young players that could still be top 30 players next year. However, they both do something that I don't love, which is strike out a lot. And Jazz has now just been really tough on us in terms of just not being out on the field a lot. And that combination makes me think I'm going to take Jackson Chourio or Dylan Cruz. I mean, if whichever one you think is a better prospect or has a higher ceiling, I think it is Chourio.
Yeah.
And so if for the steals alone, so I'm going to take Chourio out of that foursome. I don't know. I'm interested to see what you think. If you just had to keep them, I don't think we had additional information about rounds or whatever, but if you had to keep one of those four players, who would it be?
Yeah, see, that makes it tricky because he is the question does give us an out of picking two, and I think that makes this easier for me. If I had to pick one, that is tough because this is Jazz or Chourio.
Mm-hmm.
I think I lean Chourio here because I really do believe that Chourio's skill set, I mean, placating aside, like he did something in the minor leagues, I think that like no one had done since Ronald Acuna. And that, we've had comps across the board on Ronald Acuna. He steals bases. He hits the ball really, really hard. He's made better decisions without striking out. And he has always been young at his level. This is star quality stuff. This is the type of guy that rockets up to being a top 2 round guy really quick. I mean, he's also deciding between a guy that I think is a kind of fun comp and Michael Harris. Michael Harris could be a cautionary tale to people like, oh, he had a good half of a season and then we took him in the top 2 rounds in Dynasty. Well, he kind of bounced back and recaptured that top 2 or 3 Dynasty value. I think Chourio's got that. The problem is Jazz also has that, but Jazz cannot stay healthy in every way he approaches, whether it's at bats or on the field.
So if you could pick two, it would be Jazz and Chourio?
It would be Jazz and Chourio. I'd pick
one of one box and one of the other.
That's exactly what I would do. I would pretty easily pick those two. I love Dylan Cruz, and I think actually Dylan Cruz, he's got some weird, I don't say weird, but they're doing like net stolen bases, and they've got a few other kind of interesting stats putting together. I think Cruz actually might be the safest hitter of all these players, but he might have the offensive, he might have the lowest upside as far as like the counting stats that you're chasing here. So because he gets to pick two, it's easily Jazz and Chourio for me. But he's right. The question also kind of like lines in is he says, how do you weigh rookies in the campaigns and figuring out? And it's like, you've got to take chances here. Chourio has the chance to be a top 10 pick within the next 2 years. Easy.
Yeah.
Jazz has not gotten there quite yet. I don't think Cruz and CES have that upside right now. And with, stolen base, I would be, this is pretty easy, Chourio and Jazz. But personally, if I were only keeping 5, I couldn't let go of Chourio right now because I think he's breaking camp next year. I think they've done the Weimer experiment.
I mean,
it's
so close. If not, it's the next 2 week thing where he's up 2 or 3 weeks later.
Yeah, if they want to manipulate like April 20 something, you could always manipulate that. But yeah, I think he's at best breaking camp. And he didn't go to the Arizona Fall League. I think like they want him to be rested and prepared. He'll probably play some in like the Dominican Winter League. You're going to get your at bats, and I think they're going to push him hard. I mean, look at what Camanero's doing. I think his agent had shared.
I can't believe he's already up. So
14 months ago, he was in Florida Complex League, and he's now playing in the playoffs with the Rays. So it's pretty phenomenal.
Another question that we got, from Martin Johnson on Twitter was just that he was asking about what stats are sticky year to year, and this is relevant in the Christian Encarnacion Strand conversation, which is, K percentage is super sticky year to year, and whiff percentage. So here's a guy with a 14.5% swinging strike rate and a 28.6% strikeout rate in Encarnacion Strand. I think those things are going to port over to next year. Barrel rate is sticky year to year. But his 10.5% barrel rate is actually around the league. It's 10%. The league average or so is around 10% of batted balls. I forget if this is batted balls. So it's not way ahead of league average. And yes, he does hit the ball hard. He had a 112 or 111.8 max EV, which is also sticky year to year. It isn't the type of I'm not sure where the power will land at next year. If you just port him out, he could be a 26 homer hitter, but he could also be a guy who hits 26 homers and hits 240 with that strikeout rate.
Yeah.
The one thing that does not stick year to year is batting average, or batting average in balls in play. So yes, he had really high BABIPs in the minors, but those are bad defenses, all sorts of things. So the over under for me is something like a 250 and 25 homers, which I just think is more replaceable if you're talking about him compared to Jazz and Chourio, who are going to steal bases, or Dylan Cruz, who you'd hope would strike out less. I don't know he will, but you're hoping that he develops the ability to strike out less, and he will have better OBP, better walk rates than Encarnacion Strand. So
Yeah, and looking at like a player that doesn't look like they're going to put out like elite power numbers, and maybe doesn't have elite barrel percentage and strikeout concerns, like I couldn't weigh that over dominant stolen bases in any way. Like Strand might not be any better than
bases for Chourio,
Yeah, if you're looking at 40 stolen bases for either one of those guys, Cruz could be a 20 stolen base guy if he decided to steal a bit more. But like Strand could also not be much better than Jake Berger. Jake Berger puts up like elite, barreling and big hard hit numbers. He has batting average issues. That might be who he is. But these other guys, you're talking top 2 round, and you have to chase stolen bases this year. Well, very interesting too. This is the tease to my super players thing. When you hear what the average number across the top 30 stolen base guys ended up being. Since we're here, you wanted to talk about earners, and then we want to translate over to something that Jason Collette had brought up. Were there any other earners that you wanted to? I know we talked about a whole bunch of them. I don't know if there's anything else super important as far as pitching or hitting wise earner standouts for you.
No, but I do want to transition a little bit to what this means in the context of how the league changed. Jason Collette did some research comparing this year to last year, and he had homers up 12.5% over last year, steals up 41% from last year, batting average up 2%, runs per game up 8%, and strikeout rate up 1%. And that last one there, that second to last one, runs per game, 8%. That's the thing that I should have seen as obvious and didn't. That's the big thing I think I missed going into the season. Was I was in the minutia of like trying to predict who would benefit from this, from the shift rules, and who might hurt from the clock, and who's going to steal more bases. And I really tried to get into the smallest things, and I forgot that all these things are putting pressure on offense, on pitchers. You know what I mean? Like they're friendly to offense, and so therefore they're putting pressure on pitchers. And so one thing I noticed when I looked at the just qualified ERA guys, this year we had 11 guys qualify for the ERA title with a ERA under 3.30, and last year that number was 24. And so that was what I was presaging earlier when I was saying top pitchers are still a risk, and I don't really want a first-round pitcher. I have to balance that with the fact that I do need to maybe invest more in pitching at the top. The league that I won the easiest was this year was a league in which it was a 12-team league without an MI and a CI and only three outfielders, right? And so in that league, I went hard on pitching. There was keepers. It's complicated, but once we came in the draft, I think my first 3 picks were pitchers. And I added Logan Webb and Luis Castillo to my Ohtani keeper. And yeah, you could say, oh, you just won because you had Ohtani as a keeper, but it was really important to add Castillo and Webb. And in fact, I got Glass now, so I think I added 3 pitchers in my first 4 picks coming out. And that's the kind of magic that I want to access again, even in NFBC leagues, where I find the way to pick a lot of pitching up top, get those innings, get some guys who are going to be in that 330 club, but still get my first round bat. So if there's some way that I can play that game, maybe I know the 5th pitcher didn't work out this year, but let's say, other years the top 5 pitcher does work out. Maybe take the 5th best starting pitcher in the 2nd round and then hit again in the 4th and the 5th, and try to maybe get a bunch of pitchers at the top. The offense is going to be there. I just gave you all the numbers. All the offense is up. So if I can get that first round bat and add a bunch of pitching around it, that might be my strategy going forward. Most of the leagues where I did better on that side. The other thing I learned, I had this crazy thing happen in my main event where I think it was 8 weeks into the season. We were like 730th out of 790 main event teams, and last in our league. I mean, it just looked lost. We could have easily said, ain't our year. We battled back and we streamed and we did everything we could. And every week we looked at the wire and we did our best. We ended up 3rd.
Wow.
We ended up in the top 33% too of main event teams. So we did that all with work. And so you have to think about that too when you're drafting, is what can I get off the wire? What will be there for me? And how can I develop this team so that it's ready for that? And the weirdest part was our ratios got better while we were streaming, which means that they were probably pretty bad to start with.
But also there were some pretty dang good streaming options this year of players that were after. I mean, obviously Cole Reagans, Tariq Skubal, Michael King was someone towards the back. I mean, there were some
Cole
great
Reagans, and then we just kept him. Yeah, so
there was some great
streaming, and then you just keep the streamer. So like, just thinking, I think that one thing that is out there, I think that what I've learned from the streaming thing is one thing that's out there for you are runs and strikeouts. That's going to be out there. So I don't know that means that I want to take a low strikeout ace, but if the strikeouts are out there, I have to factor that into what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you have to know what you can stream your way into and what you can't. And so those are the things that I learned from my various teams is I do want to invest a little bit more in pitching, even if I still believe in first round bats. And I have to know that I will stream to some effect. So my last 5 picks may be total shots in the dark. I would love to take, the hype will be too high on Jackson Chourio, but I'd love to take a prospect or 2 in those last 5 picks.
Yeah, well, you and I talked about that a couple months ago.
Maybe this guy makes the team, otherwise that's going to be a streaming spot anyway.
Yeah, and that was something that people would have picked up a couple months back when you and I were kind of going through this of being like, hey, why not at this point? Like, if there's a guy that's at AA that even finished at AA and is a really big talent, you should consider that. Wyatt Langford with the Rangers. That's someone you guys should all consider.
Up next year.
I think he could break camp with that team. Dylan Cruz could break camp with that team. A guy like Ricky Tiedemann getting his innings up. He's dicey because of the missed innings and how much can they push him this year. But like taking a shot on some of these hitters, maybe a few pitchers, in lieu of knowing that you can just push to streaming options is probably a good idea. Something I definitely picked up, because I completely agree with what you said on pitching, was also just the relief pitching market of how expensive relief pitching. It's always been a battle between get your closers now and then I'm going to just wait and stream closing market. I think those two always battle each other. NFBC stuff, we see like relievers going like the 20s and stuff like that because people don't want to screw around. But I mean, take a look, going back as our auction calculator here, the top 10 Listen to some of these guys. Number 1 and 2, okay, Felix Bautista and Devin Williams. You're fine.
You paid for those.
Yeah. Number 3, Tanner Scott. Number 4, David Bednar. Number 5.
Oh, by the way, those 2 are big Stuff Plus wins.
Yeah.
This one isn't.
Scott and Bednar?
Yeah, this one isn't. Alexis Diaz has a funky fastball.
But outside the top 100 ADP, Camilo Duvall and Hader were in there. But then 8, Evan Phillips, 9, Craig Kimbrell, and then 10 was Emmanuel Clase. So
you paid for him, but you got your floor at least. I mean, you didn't lose your season because he ended up 10th instead of 2nd or whatever.
But also playing in the middle of the closing department, like if you want to get your elite guys, because what did we see? We saw the elite of the elite guys show up in that list, but then we also just saw absolute waiver wire fodder.
Yeah, I mean, the only guy that was in the middle that ended up in the middle was maybe, could you say Alexis Diaz and Joan Duran?
And yeah, like he was in the middle area. Yeah, but like the middle, like Andres Munoz was like a huge disappointment this year. That didn't work out. Raisel Iglesias was in there. He was like 14th on there.
Yeah, I really didn't want to take those pictures. Yeah.
Ryan Especially Presley older had a $6
Where's
return.
Kenley Jansen?
Yeah, he was another one of those middle guys. He's not even on this list, this Fangraphs list that we're looking at. He's not on the first page, at least. He is 46. He had a 90-cent return, under $1.
That's crazy because it's all saves. He didn't look good anywhere else.
Yeah, but I look at like Yanier Cano, who didn't close the whole year. He had a $3 return, and he looks mighty good. And I just said all that, and it's like I'm probably going to want him because Batista is having Tommy John surgery out the whole year. He might be the closer, and that'll be someone I want to invest in. But I think it's just wait, and you can get a lot of streaming options or take the top. Maybe you guys already know that, obviously, but there's always somebody.
Yeah, you want to get some. I think you want to get somebody. In the top 5 and then take a real long break and then just get like two or three guys later.
But like the guys that do the wheel closers, like I'm not interested in the wheel closer thing anymore. Like not that I ever really was, but like if you're on the wheel and you just double tap closers.
Oh, double? No.
Yeah, we're not double tapping it. So that
then how are you going to invest hard in starting pitching, right? Yeah. That one of the places where you take a starter, you just took a reliever.
Yeah, I did that in an AL league this year where I did it last 2 years. I double tapped closers in an AL only league, and even more so why I wouldn't do that, because then it was, I was hurting my starting pitching, and look at all these guys that end up popping up here. One thing I wanted to note back on the stats that Colette mentioned, I do think it's interesting. After the first month, I want to say he posted that stolen bases were up like 90% or just some absurd number, and it did stabilize down to still an absurd number. I would just remember it was bonkers in the first month, and it stabilized down to what is still absolutely insane. Can you repeat those numbers one more time? Do you have those on what the
homers up 12.5%, steals up 40.9, batting average up 2.1%, runs per game up 7.9%, strikeout rate up 1.3%.
Do you personally at all feel that those are pretty big gains on homers and stolen bases? Do you think because stolen bases are up so much, there's so much more in the market that you would prioritize maybe homers a little bit more? Or do you think the opposite end, because we're seeing some elite stolen base guys, that you would now want to prioritize those stolen bases because there is more in the market?
I don't know. I took my middle of the line approach with stolen bases and mostly got middle of the line results in stolen bases. I think that's okay. It is all about what happens in terms of people spend on it. If people decide not to spend on it, then maybe just rack it up. It's a category like any other, Okay. I'm not sure how people will react to this. But you can't ignore it. But I still, one thing that we've said over and over on Rates and Barrels is that we just don't believe necessarily in no power steals only guys. Those guys make me super nervous. So wherever I get my steals, I would want it with power.
Well, can I share this with you? Can I share my little super player thing? What would have been the best thing I could have done, I just didn't have time to do it, would have been do what this was last year. And I think we could speculate. Yeah, I really want to compare on it. But this is what this year looked like. So here was the super dummy formula that I put together. This is something I would do, not Eno. Eno be like, all the great stuff. I'm like, okay, I take each category that we would play in, and I take the top 30 producers. And then I average that out, and I average out the numbers to get what does the super player look like. This is very simplistic to what are the average categories you want as far as winners in your leagues. I want this many stolen bases, this many homers. I did 4 categories with pitching. I'm not going to do like losses if you guys do that, but I did ERA, wins, whip, and strikeouts. And then I did for hitting, obviously, the big major 5. So this is what, and I'm going to put up on the screen here for anybody that's watching on YouTube, youtube.com/rates and barrels. This is what the average, if you take each of the top 30 leaders in each category, would look like. This player hits 35.7 home runs, scores 100.
You haven't put it up yet.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say it all. And then
Oh yeah,
but 35.7 home runs, 105.5 runs, 103 RBI. I don't think I put. I messed up stolen bases, not writing it there, but stolen bases 34 with a 294 batting average. So that's what. So I'm gonna guess that player last year. The homers, with the homers up 12% and the stolen bases up 40%, you could probably just do some simple math if you wanted, that the homer total would probably look closer to around 32. That would probably bring the run and RBI totals down to probably closer to 100. But then the stolen base number by 40%, you're probably looking closer to the 20s, and then batting average was whatever. So that's what this player
now
looks
like. Star player is the 330 guy.
Yeah. So how many players did this year, How many do you think?
3.
One player hit this qualification. Ronald Acuna. That's the only player that hit this qualification of all across the board. There was one player that was super close. They just missed it by the stolen bases. They hit the homers, the run, the RBI, and the batting average. Do you know who that player was?
Why am I not thinking of him? It's got to be obvious.
It's very obvious.
Who is it?
Mookie Betts.
Oh, Mookie, yeah.
Mookie.
I forgot that he hit 38 homers this year. Yeah.
He was the close to super player. I could have probably gone down the list and given you a whole bunch. There were 2 others that I felt that were within real close range of this, and they missed just by a couple little notches. The 2 players were Julio Rodriguez, who was 3 homers off, 2 runs off, 1 RBI away. He hit the stolen bases, and he looks like
this
0.20 off on the batting average. He was super close to the super player. Number 2, Freddie Freeman. He was 6 homers off, a little bit more, but he nailed the runs. He was 1 RBI off, 11 stolen bases. But remember, first baseman got it, and he demolished the batting average. So those 2 players were close to the super player. Hey, no shocker, these are all first rounders, but I still think like Freddie Freeman outside the top 5 is like a monster this year. They almost accomplished my offensive superpower number, but doesn't this look crazy inflated? I mean, like I said, probably last year, this is closer to a 30-20 guy with less run and RBIs, and the offensive production have made almost 35-35 guys.
Where
but
are
the
you
stolen
taking Freddie
bases and
Freeman
homers,
next year? 35-year-old.
I think I'm taking him probably top 6.
Shoo.
I think so. Top 8 maybe once I really get through it.
In me, but he, I think it was Sam Miller had this great piece about players that kept beating their projections like over and over again. And one of the examples was Dansby Swanson, who just kept getting a little better over time, and the other one was Freddie Freeman. And mostly it's not necessarily, I mean, yes, he's gotten better over time, but also he just hasn't aged, like in Atlanta in 2013, he was 50% better than league average. 10 years later, he was 63% better than league average.
I agree. He beat every single one of his 5 counting categories this year over last year, and it'll be 34 all next year. So I think I'm still going to be pretty hyper aggressive.
Was it 34 all next year? He just turned 34.
He just turned 34.
21 days older. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a hard time with the falling knife syndrome of like, I don't want to be the one catch it on the way down. I don't know if we're quite there. And he literally beat every single category, and he's just such a advantage positionally as well. And where you have to really chase those stolen bases to get kind of the elite side of it, he still gets you there. He's one of those unique, like Matt Olson's incredible. Don't get me wrong. That's elite power, but it's a
more
burger.
traditional first base package, you know?
Yeah. Where this is like, I have batting average, I have elite batting average, elite run, elite RBI.
And I'm not falling that
stolen.
far behind in home runs, you know?
Not
like he
really.
got 29 homers this year.
Yeah. And you can pick
I
it up
guess
in other
that's the
spots.
one category that, you know, if I do draft him next year, I think that there's a possibility he hits between 20 and 30 homers, like anywhere. He could hit 21. He hit 21 in 2022, you know, like he's kind of an oppo guy, you know. What if the ball's a little bit, you know, less bouncy or doesn't, you know, a little bit more drag or whatever it is that it changes every year. And some of those oppo homers don't fall for him. And he hits 20 homers next year, steals 15 bases and hits 325. He'll still have a ton of runs, ton of RBI. That'll be 15 more, like, you know, be like 12 more stolen bases than your average first baseman, and he'll blow all the first basemen out of the water in batting average. So you'll get all these advantages, and you'll still get 21 homers as long as you like say in your head that he's not necessarily a power threat, and that you in some other place get a little bit more power, maybe get a catcher that has a little bit more power or something like you could pair him with one of those catchers like Cal Raleigh, right? Where you're like, okay, my catcher's going to hit 220, but he's going to hit 30 homers. If I smush Cal Raleigh and Freddie Freeman together, bam, like that's a normal package.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably make the argument to like Kyle Schwarber. You know, Kyle Schwarber is going to fall back, and you're going to get elite homers. It just really hurts you in the batting average. But you could pair those guys together. The interesting thing we don't have yet, I'm going to watch with the shift in the base situation. We also don't know what the age decline to stolen bases is going to look like over time. Because something you could argue with like a bigger first base type getting older, will he stop running? But I don't think we have any type of proper data until we see at least 3 or 4 years that, you know, will that advantage of space between the bases help guys not lose those stolen bases as they get older? You know, Whit Merrifield had more stolen bases. You know, that's not something I think we can project to decline. So I don't know. I think Freddie Freeman is kind of a safety net. So I'm very into him.
And, you know, despite batting average going up 2%, it's still not the healthiest stat in the world. Median batting average in my NFBC leagues was around 255 for a 15-teamer. Let me just check that one more time against this one. 255, 256 is median batting average for these. I just smushed Schwarber and Freeman together, and this year they would have hit 267 together with 76 homers and 23 stolen bases and 239 runs and 206 RBI.
Hello.
So that works pretty well. Freddie Freeman buys you that one sort of get out of jail free chip for later, where you're like, ooh, this guy's only problem is bad batting average. I'm taking him.
Yeah, exactly. Here is the super pitcher. This one looks a little bit more average, and it's 13.4 wins. So again, I did the same thing, top 30 in each category, averaged it out. 13.4 wins, a 3.4 ERA, which is, I believe, like you were talking earlier about the 24 guys the year before that had done a 3.3, and this year it was like 10 or 12. Well, 3.4 actually ended up being what the super player would be, a 1.14 whip and 202 strikeouts. It's actually kind of average-ish, but
202 strikeouts is probably the limiting factor here.
It is. There were actually only 2 pitchers that hit this marker, this exact marker here. And I took off one category, which was cheating. He did not. A fun fact, he didn't even get into the super close territory either because of the ERA went up. I actually think he might. Actually, now I'm thinking he might be in the one, but he did not make this one. Only 2 pitchers hit this criteria. Cole is one. Yes. Cole, you actually mentioned the other guy earlier.
Snell.
Nope. Whip.
Because of
Whip kills Snell.
Oh, Whip, yeah.
You mentioned him earlier as a big key. AL
Bradish?
West.
Bradish?
Nope. I'll give it to you. Luis Castillo is the only other guy with Garrett Cole that hit this marker. And I took Luis Castillo in an early mock as a third SP. That's how good he's been. So hit the 13.4, 3.4 ERA, 1.14 whip, and over 200 strikeouts. He hit that marker. Here were the close guys, and you already mentioned a couple of them. Snell hit 3 of the 4 categories, but the whip was too high. Kevin Gossman hit 3 of the 4 categories, whip was too high. Kodai Senga hit 3 of the 4, whip was too high. So he made that marker.
Do you think he's just going to do what he did this year again? There's something that makes me a little nervous about him.
What do you mean? Like
it's the 11% walk rate.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, are you saying like he's just going to throw the same mix and we're going to just have walks through the roof, or is he going to stop throwing something? I mean, I think he's going to
Sierra, you know, like.
Yeah, but also look at like think of the adjustments that had to happen. I mean, I'm trying to pull this up live here, but what was the second half? What were the second half Senga numbers compared to the first half? Because I mean, the whip is going to be, I mean, also Snell just was one of the most elite pitchers,
he
like a 5
he did get
whip.
better. He went from a 331 to a 258 ERA.
Yep, there you go. Woba was down by,
his walk rate went down from 12.3 to 9.6.
Yep. Keep going.
Anymore? Yeah, I mean, he got better.
It was pretty dang good. 4 more players in the almost made it category. Justin Steele hit 3 of the 4, but he missed the strikeouts.
This is one I'm not betting on for next year.
Yeah. And I mean, 3.4. Do you like when you look at that number right there, do you think it's going to be a big miss across the board on Steele?
Here's what I think is he's going to have a walk rate regression. And we saw in the second half that he was a 3.62 ERA guy. And part of that was actually homers, not walk rate. I don't know. I just I don't it's a, one of the things that Stuff Plus misses on is 2-pitch pitchers. This guy's a 2-pitch pitcher, and so I don't want, like, why am I going to say that, this 2-pitch pitcher is going to beat all his peripherals where all the other 2-pitch pitchers have been lesser than their peripherals? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
outside of Strider, but
yeah. Right. Like Strider this year was worse than his peripherals. He was worse than his Stuff Plus. And he's a 2-pitch pitcher. Ashcraft, there's a lot of 2-pitch pitchers that underperformed. This is the one that overperformed. So I'm just going to say that I think of him as like a number 2 at best.
There are 3 other guys that just missed it. Zach Wheeler just missed this by ERA, a 3.61.
He's perennially underrated, I feel like.
He's super underrated. That's exactly what I pulled out of this. And then 2 guys missed it by strikeouts, Verlander and Kirby. They hit the other markers, but they missed it because Verlander only 144 strikeouts, Kirby 172. So any bump would get them into that area.
Kirby's going to be, I think, in my top 15 next year.
I think so.
And I think ranking Kirby against Verlander will be really interesting. Just because Verlander's 21.5% strikeout rate is the worst he's had since 2015 when he was injured. And he's 40 years old. He's going to turn 41 at the beginning of the season. And he's going to pitch deep into this playoffs, possibly. So I might have Kirby ahead of Verlander next year.
I think so. I think he's like the only major leaguer too that's older than me at this point. Verlander, Kirby. There were a couple guys that
Rich Hill said he's coming back. It's just
okay. Never mind.
The second half of the season next year.
Never gonna.
He's the only major leaguer the same age as me.
Affectionately, he's the Roach of MLB. He's just never gonna go away.
Somebody will be like, well, we need some spot starts, and he only wants $1 million. So come on.
Yeah, why not? There were 3 guys that were close in kind of a multiple categories. Merrill Kelly, Kyle Bradish, and Logan Webb. They were very close, like almost hit all the markers across the board. And then there were 3 guys, and you can comment on any of these, that were pacing to be able to do this. Michael King, Tariq Skubal, and Tanner Bybee, all in the close range. I think Yuri Perez was there, and I had pulled up Glassnow. I think Glassnow was kind of close. And again, I could have kind of kept going. I'm just giving you guys extras here, but Kelly, Bradish, Webb were the next closest group to being like one-off. And then Michael King, Skubal, and Bybee were standouts that looked like they were pacing to make this.
There's something familiar. There's something similar about them in that Neither one of them has an amazing fastball, but command a really good secondary pitch that they play off of. I mean, it's not the same kind of pitch, but something interesting there. I would put Glasnow, King, and Skubal in one category, which is extremely tantalizing, extremely interesting. Love them. Going to be on every, sleeper list going into the season. Have been in the past and will be again. And extremely high pitching injury risk, I feel like.
Yeah, I think I agree
Skubal's
with you
coming
on that.
off an injury. Glasnow's coming off an injury. Maybe Glasnow, maybe people will forget because Glasnow had one of his better innings totals. Michael King had a fractured elbow the other year from pitching. So, and he's going to be doing a big innings bump. So all three of those guys are guys that I like, that I'd put the over-under at like 110 innings and buy them accordingly. If I could get them as my third pitcher or fourth pitcher so that I had some horses ahead of them, I'd like it. But inevitably, what I end up doing is picking those injury risks a little bit too high and then being like, dang, where'd all my innings go?
Well, I think you can also ask, hey, where did my innings go in general? 5 pitchers went over 200 innings this year. That was it. So, that marker of what you need has lowered. And I think 170, 175 looks like a really good number to hit at this point based on averages. So, 120 is the new 140. So you can just kind of keep moving that up.
Yeah, 175 gets you in the top 30. 150 gets you in the top 60. So if you think about that, if you're in a 15-team league, 160 innings would be your SB4 just on innings alone. Obviously there's all sorts of other things to think about, but that means that your fifth starting pitcher is going to have less than 150 innings. That's kind of crazy.
It is kind of crazy. Well, these are fun experiments, a good talk. As far as my little super player thing, I might make this into an article because I want to pair it against last year and I need to add more names. This is something I was working on today, but it's a good look across the board, talking about the earners on the year, talking about some MVP stuff, talking about where the league offensively has changed and what are some of the markers of the elite of elite players. Those are a lot of guys that we're going to want to be paying attention to. Not going to be a lot of sleepers there. And also never say never. I'm not going to say this is my last episode. I don't know. I have no idea. Hopefully I'm back no matter what.
We'll get you back in the AFL for sure.
Whatever's going on.
And thanks for everybody that reached out and shared their successes this year. It's been a pleasure helping you win and hope for more success in the future.
That's right. It's been a great time hanging with you guys. I believe layover next week, DVR coming back, and all the great stuff here on Rates and Barrels. Make sure you go to theathletic.com/rates and barrels, get a subscription so you are locked in the whole season. It is not crazy expensive, and it is very, very worth it. So go and do that today. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so you don't miss when the podcast drop, and youtube.com/rates and barrels so you can see the faces. You can see all the stuff. You can see the things that go up there. Thank you guys, as always, for hanging out. Hopefully your season was awesome. I will talk to you in the AFL and hopefully Eno as well soon. For Eno, I'm Welsh. We'll talk to you next time right here on Rates and Barrels. Bye, friends.
Thanks for listening.